The Bruins hit the ice in Boston for the first time tonight, taking on the Chicago Blackhawks and coming in at 1-0 after, I guess, a surprising victory in Washington. I don't know. It's one game of 82. I don't know how surprising it can be. But the Marco Sturm era is off to a flyer, but there's still so many question marks surrounding this team in the 2025-26 season as they're about to take the home ice for the first time this season. So because of that, we bring in Andrew Fantucchio of Boston Hockey Now to break down everything that's about to happen in this Bruins season. And Andrew, we talk about 1-0, okay? How much are you buying into the Jeremy Swayman Vezina, the David Pastrnak Hart Trophy, and the 82 0-0 regular season for the Bruins? Can't hear you there. I don't know if your mic is muted. Or...
Good?
Yeah, we got you now. We got you now.
I don't know about 82 0-0. I don't know about Swayman Vezina. I don't know about any of those things. But I don't know how you can look at last night's game and not be encouraged, at least about that this team is heading in a positive direction compared to last season, which really there's only one way to go but up. But all in all, very good showing in the first game under Marco Sturm.
And I don't want to make too much out of one game, but you're right in that it looked positive, right? It looked good. They didn't look totally lost out there. It's not like there's going to be a lot of sex appeal with this team. There's not going to be a ton of offensive creativity. What you saw last night, though, is that the blueprint for how the Bruins are going to win games?
100%. I mean, I think you saw it even going back to the final preseason game against the Rangers. This is a team that's going to have to be very stingy and tough in their own end to win games. They're not going to win a lot of games 5-4. They're not going to win games 6-5. It's going to be 3-1, 2-1, 1-0. And you saw it last night. The penalty kill, what were they, 5 for 5? Yep. Now, I don't know if you really can bank on your penalty kill being that strong every night, and Swayman coming up with 34 saves on 35 shots. But that's the formula. That's the formula that Marco Sturm has preached ever since the start of training camp. That's the formula that the front office has wanted since the beginning of the offseason. That was the blueprint right there. That's how the Boston Bruins are going to have to win games this year.
And yeah, I mean, that was it. David Pastrnak gets in on all 3 goals. Jeremy Swayman makes 34 saves. And to be fair, I mean, it wasn't a ton of like grade A highlight reel saves from Swayman. It wasn't a ton of great scoring opportunities for a Washington team that did outshoot the Bruins basically 2-1 in this game. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot of that throughout the season. I don't want to hamstring you here to an actual prediction on how far they'll go, but based on this roster and that style of hockey to win games, is that a team that can get into the playoffs playing that style?
They can get into the playoffs. A lot has to go right, though. It's one of those years where you're banking on one of those handful of teams that you're in this middle of the pack with to kind of disappoint. You're looking for someone else to be last year's version of the Bruins for the Bruins to get in. And that's how I see it. To me, this is a team that's going to be in it to the very end. It might come down to game 82. It might come down to that. And we'll see. But this team has the makings to be a team that can get in and surprise some people and be a very tough round 1 matchup for any team at the top of the Eastern Conference.
And so going off that, because I totally agree, like a lot of things need to happen positively for the Bruins that obviously did not happen positively last year. Kind of the bottom fell out of that thing, especially after the trade deadline. So that said, what are the things that need to go right?
Well, you saw the first thing last night. You need Jeremy Swayman to be, an elite number 1 goaltender. And you need the first line to produce. So you have check those 2 boxes. And I wrote earlier this week, the first line is going to determine the Bruins' ceiling. The goaltending will determine their floor. So if Swayman can be that kind of goalie and be number 1, they're at least not going to be in the, they're not going to be in contention for the number 1 pick. But you need the first line to produce like that, average about a goal a night from at least one of those guys. And then you need the power play to score. They need someone like a Pavel Zacha, a Casey Middlestat, a Victor Arvidsson to put up 20 to 25 goals. And then you need someone probably in that bottom 6 to also do the same. There's a lot that has to – this team does not have the horses to sort of say, okay, we can kind of phone it in for a night, take a night off, because they're going to have to be a team that plays every game, every shift, every period at 100%, at 100 miles an hour. And that's really easy to do game one. Can you do that in game, 54 in the middle of February on a Tuesday night against Anaheim? You know what I mean? That's a tough.
Even tonight. I mean, this is a second game in 2 nights. There's a bit of travel. You're facing a young team that's faster than you in the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, that could even be an issue just like that.
Well, this should be a game that the Bruins win. Look, Chicago, I know they're young and exciting, and for some reason the NHL loves to shove the Blackhawks down our throat every chance they get with every national TV game possible. But the fact of the matter is, the Blackhawks are not a good hockey team right now.
They suck. Yeah,
they do.
They suck.
So if I'm the Bruins, I'm looking at this. This is almost a statement game. You kind of came out, you surprised Washington, good. But now, can you beat a bad team? And that was something they never did last year. There were a lot of games last year, especially early on, where a bad team came into the Garden and kind of walked all over them because they would make bad mistakes or couldn't get out of their own way. Mm-hmm. To me, this is absolutely a statement game. Can you take care of business on your home ice in the second half of a back-to-back?
Yeah. Lost to Anaheim twice, lost to San Jose, lost to Nashville, I want to say too. Those were all teams picking at the top of the draft, man. It was pretty bad out there. And most of the reason why, the Bruins were so bad last year. They weren't good in any of the 3 zones at either end of the ice, but obviously what's made out a lot is the fact they were 28th in goals scored. And they didn't add anything really offensively. Arvidsson, you're hoping for a bounce back in the way he's played under Sturm's tutelage in the past in LA, but you really just didn't add much when it came to scoring, add much at all. So when you talk about the things that need to go right and getting some bottom 6 scoring, is there anyone you see that could be a breakout candidate and say, well, if this guy comes through, then the story changes?
2 guys on the roster at the current moment that I would look at. Mikey Eyssimont is a guy who is very much a shot first kind of guy. He came in this year saying that he feels like in the other stops he's had, he's always sort of been just kind of a checking forward grinder kind of guy, pesty sort of player. But he came in this year saying like he feels that there's more to his game and can be more of an offensive contributor. So I look at him. I look at Marakush Nadinov, who is kind of a Swiss Army knife, do-it-all kind of guy. Sturm has him right now on the 4th line, but can come. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets some reps on the 2nd line, 1st line maybe at one point. If that line just starts to go a little stale, because that stuff happens. I'm not saying that any of those guys are going to fall off a cliff, but sometimes you got to juggle things around. So those are the guys on the roster right now who I would sort of say might be, you might look in the middle of the year and say, oh wow, this guy's sitting on 15 goals, but. They did try to go out and add some offense. Cam Neely said at the press conference earlier, this week that they went out in free agency and were looking to add some offense. Brock Besser was sitting there. Who was the other guy that was?
You had Ehlers going from Winnipeg to Carolina. Yep.
But
there wasn't a lot. It was still
the market was what it was, and I don't fault the Bruins for not being able to capitalize because Besser ended up going back to Vancouver. Ehlers seemed destined for Carolina, and then there was nothing else. But the 2 guys they kind of brought in, Mate Blumel, Alex Steeves, 2 guys who led the AHL in goals last season, were brought in to add some scoring depth, try to maybe see if they can pop at the NHL level, and neither one of them are on the starting roster, the opening night lineup.
Yeah,
and that
they could lead the AHL in goals this season.
The Providence Bruins might break the all-time record for
they
points.
Might break some records, yeah.
But if you're looking, I don't know. What was the point in bringing in Steeves or Blumel if you're not going to have them on your opening night lineup? Guys who, for a team that's going to struggle as much to score as the Bruins, I don't feel like they can they can turn away those kind of guys right now. Patra, Lysell, those guys are different. Young prospects who the Bruins have been trying to develop for years, and simply just look, neither one of them looked particularly great in training camp. And I'm not saying Blumel or Steeves were world beaters or nothing. But again, if you're hoping to kind of take a flyer on a guy, take the flyer, put him in the lineup and just see. Give him 20 games. If he doesn't work, okay, then fine. But that's what you brought them here for. Why aren't they here?
And you led me into that next one about Matt Poitras, because again, it was a bit of a frustrating preseason. He's had a run of games, 30 or 66 games over 2 NHL seasons. The numbers haven't been there. He's had some injuries. Are we nearing kind of the end of the road with Matt Poitras, or are people getting too dramatic about that for a 21-year-old?
Way too dramatic. The Bruins are by no means giving up on Matt Poitras, nor should they. It's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, good for him for breaking camp with the Bruins 2 years ago and kind of filling a major role after Bergeron and Krejci retired, because they had no centers at the time. But on the other side of that, that might have been the worst thing for him, because now he creates all these expectations and hype, and believe me, I think Poitras is capable of reaching those expectations. But right now, he's only 22 years old, and he's got to learn to play in a grown man's league. He's lighting up the AHL right now. He did last year. I think he was almost a point per game player, if not more. I have to go back and check the numbers down in Providence, but again, he looked really good down there. But he gets up to the NHL, and he, every single shift, he's getting flattened by someone.
Yeah.
And I'm not here questioning Matt Poitras' toughness, because there's a lot of hits I've seen that kid take who would have killed a lot of me. I wouldn't be able to get up from the hits he's taken. He pops right up. So I'm not questioning his toughness, but he needs to learn to avoid those hits. He needs to learn to make fast decisions in time and space. And that's a thing that every young player has to go through. And so if he needs that more time in Providence, that's okay. But the Bruins are by no means giving up on him.
And so looking at this roster again, as we get you ready for the home opener here, you talked about Asamont a little bit and what he can provide in the bottom six, but looking outside of this kind of big three, I'll call it Jeremy Swayman, Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak, who is then the next most important player on the team? Maybe not even the best, but important to the Bruins.
That's a great question, the way you framed it.
Thank you.
And I don't know if I can name a single guy, because there's so many things that have to go right. I think it's huge that they have Hampus Lindholm back, and he looks better than ever. Seriously, after missing, I think it was close to 70 games last year.
Yeah, 65 games. Yeah.
Something like that, right? He's come back and he's flying around. They just made him officially the third alternate captain, which surprised me. Not that I don't think he deserves it, but I thought they were going to go more with kind of a rotate that third alternate spot rather than give it to a single person. But Hampus is definitely deserving of it. I think him. Oh, you know what? Okay, that's right. Mason Lohrei. He's the guy.
Okay,
he's the guy for me.
Love it.
So, what did Marco Sturm get hired on this year? He got brought to be the head coach of the Bruins because he was going to fix their defense and he was good with coaching young players. Who does that fit? That's Mason Lohrei. To me, if Mason Lohrei has a good year, and that I don't mean, he doesn't have to win the Norris, he doesn't have to be anything like that, but can he show positive signs? Can he progress? Can he, become a reliable player in his own end? That to me will indicate if Marco Sturm is the right head coach for the Boston Bruins, and if he can do everything he says he can do. Mason Lohrei to me is almost like the X factor, and I don't want to put that kind of pressure on such a young player. But again, given everything that Sturm was hired on, if he can't fix Lohrei, then can he fix anyone?
It's a good point. It's a good point. And you're right. He doesn't need to win the Norris. He needs to start by not winning the Masters. Okay. He's got to be better than a -40 or whatever it is. Got to start there.
I mean, he was put in such a hard spot last year,
for sure.
With everyone out, all the injuries, and he was playing penalty kill. That was one of those years where I think Mason Lohrei, in a way, had to learn by getting his ass kicked. Sometimes.
Yeah, and we usually hear like the 200 games or so with defensemen, and that's like how you find your footing in the NHL. It's a long time.
Exactly, and and then not having, Lindholm or McAvoy, and then Carlo gets traded. It's just he was put in a really tough spot. So I don't fault him at all for the struggles he had last year, but now to take the steps that he needs, that's I think where you'll see whether or not Sturm actually is the right coach to lead the Bruins forward and can actually deliver on what he promised.
And you mentioned the A in there. It goes to Hampus Lindholm. He gets the third one. Obviously, Bruins rolling without a captain for now anyway. Not that I was surprised either to see Hampus Lindholm. He's obviously been a part of this team for a while now, and the guys look up to him. But I was a little surprised because it felt like there was some momentum at the end of last season around Nikita Zadorov. We like it. We see the fights, but you're actually in there. You're talking with these guys. It felt like he took more of a leadership role. Was that a wrong read? This guy's been in a lot of organizations. Does he have a leadership voice in that room?
I think he absolutely does have a leadership voice in the room. Nikita is one of the guys in the locker room who's always good for a good quote, no matter the situation.
Yep.
And I think he likes to use it in the room. I just think simply, Hampus being, is he the third longest tenured guy on the roster now? He might be because he was 20,
That would check out.
21, right? When
Yeah,
they brought
21,
him over
22
from the
season was when they brought him
there's been a
over.
lot of
Yeah.
turnover in the last few years. I think it may have just came down to seniority,
Mm-hmm.
and also the balance and dynamic. Maybe they wanted a guy who was a little bit more stoic on that third pairing. I don't think by any means it's an indictment on Zadorov or Elias Lindholm or I think I tweeted out during the preseason that there was going to be a few guys who I thought that rotated through. Janot was one of the guys I labeled. Corrali, I just think it simply came down to just striking the right balance. Pastrnak is boisterous and kind of flashy. McAvoy can be very straightforward and stern and can be a bit of a hard ass. And I think that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. I think you need to strike that balance, and Hampus kind of fits sort of the middle, is really that quiet, stoic, lead by example kind of guy.
Want to talk about one of the prospects that's actually getting a shot here, has earned his shot at the NHL level, and that's Fraser Minten, right? He makes the team out of camp. Stop. He had the option to go down to Providence, or the Bruins had that option to send him down. They keep him on the team. He's centering that third line with Asimont, the guy you talked about, who kind of need to be the scorer on that line. Tanner Jeannot on the other side. So they got some beef. There's going to be matchups being played there with the third line. What are your expectations for Fraser Minten this year in the role that he's going to play for this team under Marco Sturm?
Expectations wise, I think he's met them already in terms of just being he's so far ahead of the curve when it comes to playing in his own end for a kid who's only 21 years old. I think we're going to look back at this Brandon Carlo trade. That's how the Bruins got Minten, kind of like how we looked at the Tuukka Rask trade. As a great deal that the Bruins got, a cornerstone piece for the next, however so many years. And the Maple Leafs kind of got a rental who, and no disrespect to Brandon Carlo, but I think we're looking back on this trade as something that the Bruins won, flat out. Minten right now, this year, they're just kind of asking him to be a reliable, middle of the ice defensive forward. Kill penalties. But I do wonder, what is his offensive upside for a kid who is so young? What more can he, they can develop him into more than just a third line checking center. But then you also have to look at what's ahead, what's best for the organization. Lindholm still signed for a few more years. James Hagens is your number one center, no doubt about it. But can, Hagens be Krejci and, Minten be Bergeron? And no, look, no one's Patrice Bergeron.
I'd love that.
No one is Patrice Bergeron, but can they play those sort of similar roles where, Hagens is the playmaker, kind of is more the offensive guy, and Minten is your 200-foot lockdown center. You throw him out there against every team's top line every night, and then can give you some offense when you need it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I want to put those level expectations, but can those two kind of have that, provide that kind of dynamic?
Can they both make the Hall of Fame? Will they both have their numbers retired? Yeah, we'll see. But Minten, look, I mean, you mentioned it. That's the reason why he's here, at least this year. It's tough to put a ceiling on a kid who's that young in terms of his offensive ability, but he led the Bruins in shorthanded time on ice in game one of the season. Like that's pretty indicative, I think, what he's going to give you. All right, Andrew, before we get you out of here, we're sitting here on the day of the home openers. The Bruins take on the Blackhawks at the Garden tonight. Won't put you into prediction. I already said I'm not going to do that, but I do want to ask you, what does a successful season look like for this year's Bruins?
I would say a successful year is being in the playoff hunt. Mm-hmm. They don't have to make the play, just be in the hunt, be in the conversation. And can you get one of those guys down in Providence, or one of these young players, whether it be Lohrei, Patra, someone else who can come in and take on more of a impact role than what they've played so far. Can you infuse some more youth into this lineup and say like, okay, we already got Kiki, Lindholm, Pasternak, McAvoy, Swayman. Who's that other guy? Zadorov. Like, we need another younger. It could be Minton, who's already here, but they need one of those younger players to come in and say, all right, we know he's going to be a Bruin for the next 10 years. That's what they need.
Love that. Love that. And I'm loving what we've seen from Minton, man. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I am loving what we've seen from Minton.
The Bruins love it. Sturm has come out already and said, he plays like a man. Marco Sturm loves Fraser Minton, the Bruins front off. There's a lot of good things being said about Fraser Minton within the Bruins organization, within that locker room, and I think it's well-deserved.
Andrew Fantucchio of Boston Hockey Now. Andrew, let us know. Are you working on something? How can people find you?
Just follow my coverage on bostonhockeynow.com. Follow me on Twitter at @_Fantucchio, and keep looking out for stories and content throughout the year. Have you covered?
We know you will have us covered. We appreciate you taking the time today, Andrew.
Thanks, Cam. Appreciate it.
There he goes. Andrew Fantucchio of Boston Hockey Now. Man, he will be covering this Bruins team all season long, and definitely hope to hear from him as this season goes along. Let us know what you think about this Bruins season that kicks off the home schedule tonight. What do you expect from this team? What does success look like in your eyes for this Bruins team? Let me know in the comment section below. Then be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep my job, and it helps you get the alternative to Boston Sports Talk Radio every weekday live at high noon Eastern time on YouTube, and then wherever you get your podcasts as well.